On this week's show, we're going to be dissecting and discussing all things Championship, including the ins and outs of many clubs in the month of May. We'll be going to be looking at the current table, and we're going to be looking at a possible merger between League One and the Championship.
Welcome to another set of six, and this week it's a Championship special. Right, Mark, let's get into it. 1895 Cup is the first place to start on Tackle 1. So who's made the final this year?
Well, it's a repeat of the 2021 final with York versus Featherstone. There was two really close games. One was really close, and one I didn't expect the scoreline to be so great between Featherstone and Oldham, but that's what the Championship's throwing out this year. Some unexpected results. So the first one was between Bradford and York, and that was to be expected. A really, really close game, and it really did go down to the wire.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I think it was still kind of in the balance, sort of last 10-15 minutes, really. Bradford started the stronger of the two sides. York went in at half-time, I think, kind of on top, and then... the last sort of 15 minutes, I think York was sort of trying to hold on, but Bradford didn't have enough, really.
Yeah, so these two teams, when we predicted right at the start of the season that they're going to be fighting for the top spots, and it's pretty much settling down the league now to reflect that. So it's always going to be two really, really up for it sides in a really close game. Like I say, it went down to the wire. Last 5 minutes, there was a try from Joe Brown, really quality winger / fullback for York. Would have thought there'd be some Super League team sniffing around him. But he pulled it out of the bag for them. But it was a bit of a contentious decision. I think it was either that one or one towards the end with a York foot in touch, which I know a lot of the Bradford fans were going nuts about. But without the video ref, there's not a lot that can be done. So York just snatched it in the end.
Yeah, I wasn't at the game. I listened to it on the radio. My parents were at the game. They said it was close, but I think York deserved the win. I think they deservedly going to Wembley. Yeah, I mean,
a lot of I say most people would have thought Bradford would have just won this one because they were just gearing up for this final. But like I said, I mean, York, they've had a bit of an up and down season, but I think they're really starting to hit the straps at the moment, and they've done it at just the right time.
Yeah, and then the other one, which I wasn't shocked by the win. Well, I was a little bit, but I didn't expect the win to be such a margin. So Featherstone beating Oldham, and big scoreline that was.
Well, you remember at the start of the season when we were looking at the predictions for the top six, and we said Featherstone they'll be fighting for the top, and they just had a dreadful start to the season. Paul Cook took over.
Yeah,
a few scary moments for him because just knowing the interviews after the game. He's shown to be really, really frustrated, man. But I know this week in the press he said that since day one we've had a consistent message that we've given to the players, and it will always be that consistent message. And I think it's just biding your time. They've got a few players back from injury. They've got a settled half-pack combination now. So them hammering Oldham, didn't expect it. But I'm not surprised because, again, they have got the quality. They should not be down the bottom where they are at the moment.
Yeah.
But Oldham, I don't know, is it because they've just got an unsettled squad? They've got so many players, so many ins and outs, and that counts for a lot.
Yeah, it looks a little bit with Oldham like they've tried to assemble a bit of a dream team, really. I mean, if you looked at their squad at the start of the season, you say definitely one of the strongest sides in the Championship. However, yeah, you're right. They haven't quite had consistency, have they, this season? And I think that's starting to show. And when it comes to big games like a semi-final, they just didn't seem ready for it.
See, Oldham, they've had a lot of injuries. That's why they've had a lot of players coming in. They've played a lot of players out of position over the last few months. So they've suffered. Whereas Featherstone, they suffered a lot with injuries at the start of the season, but they're now starting to get them back. So I think this semi-final for Featherstone just came at the right time, but for Oldham, it was just in the midst of the injury crisis.
The two head coaches for Featherstone, both going up against their old side, against York.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one because, like I said, Featherstone have started to hit the straps recently. And York, I think, despite being up and down, they've always had that strength about them. So I think when it comes to Wembley in a few weeks, you're going to have two teams who are on top of the game. I think it's going to be a cracking final. A repeat of 2021, as I said earlier on. That time, that was Featherstone. Because I remember back in 2021, it was between Featherstone and Toronto, I think, to see who was going to go up. So,
yeah.
But this time, it's sort of like the way around a little bit, where I think York has got a more settled side. But again, who's going to win in a few weeks? I just don't know.
Well, I'm going to just about say, Mark, this is the point where I put you on the spot and go, what's your prediction then for the 1895 Cup final?
A few weeks ago, when Widnes played Featherstone, Featherstone weren't that special, but what they did was that their rugby was, how can I put it? It was just 100% rugby. They knew what they had to do. They had a game plan, and they stuck to it. York, again, bit up and down, but when they're on it, they're strong. They're forwards. It's really, really hard to break down the forward pack. Getting out your own 20 against York is always a problem, but yeah, who's going to win? You got a coin?
Well, I'm going York.
I'll go Featherstone then, because again, they just seem to be hitting the straps at the right moment.
Right, okay, on to tackle 2 then. So there's been a statement put out by Sheffield Eagles. I don't even know what to make of this, so I'm interested to get your take on it. Sheffield Eagles have thrown their weight behind Craig Lingard, which is always a worrying sign if you're a head coach. I remember Featherstone doing it earlier on in the season, and look how that ended up. Yeah, so there's been protests going on at Sheffield. Fans aren't happy. The situation with Mark Aston, I think his appeal was... it didn't go through, did it? Yeah, so let's discuss Sheffield Eagles and that statement then.
The statement is all about Mark Aston. He's lost his appeal. And I think the plan was always once his ban is up, he would step back into a more hands-on role with the coaching. Yeah. I think Sheffield have had a few not money problems, but they're having to look after the finances a bit more than previous years. So they've now said that there's not going to be any roles for Mark Aston other than on the commercial side, which is great because Mark Aston, he's got the gift of the gab. But I remember back in the start of the season when we did a podcast, and I think on the previous one I mentioned about Sheffield being the Mark Aston type club, and that's what it still is. And it's like, if you remember when Alex Ferguson, going from one extreme to the other, when Alex Ferguson retired from being the manager at Man United, it was always whoever's going to take over has got to take over from Fergie, right? And whoever's taking over from Mark Aston, you're taking over from Tubbs, you're taking over from Mr. Sheffield Eagles. And so I think Craig Lingard, he was always going to be up against it. And they've suffered for it this year.
Yes, they have. Do you think the fans are just like 100% Mark Aston fans, and it doesn't matter who comes in, they just ain't going to move away from that?
I think at the moment, yeah. If Sheffield would have been performing a lot better, it would have been that fella that's helping out in the background. But because he was always going to be like this. Again, at the start of the season, I predicted this. They're either going to do well under Craig Lingard or it will be a misery for him. Because again, Mark Aston has been the coach of Sheffield since they started back up again, early 2000s, late 90s.
Late 90s, I think, yeah.
So he's like Alex Ferguson-esque.
Yeah.
And United still haven't got it right. I'll turn it into a football podcast, United, but they're just similarities in that once you are ingrained into a club, it's so hard for you to escape that, if that makes sense. So it's a shame for Craig Lingard. It's a shame for the people who work so hard at Sheffield. I think they've overperformed in the last few seasons because they've not really had the finance. I went last year to their ground and they've got a main stand and everyone else stands around the perimeter. They've got, I'd say about 100, 200 real diehard fans who keep going, banging the drum all game. Once you've lost them, you're losing the heart, aren't you? So I don't know where Sheffield go from this.
Yeah, and there was a protest on the hill, wasn't there? I saw it on social media. There's I can't remember what the banner said, but yeah.
It said something like Mark Hannigan out. Mark Hannigan is the operations director at Sheffield, so he'd be the person that makes all the decisions. Get rid of your operations director. You get rid of the people in the background. Who comes in? Mm-hmm. I would have reckoned that if there was a multimillionaire ready to come in, they would have just walked. away, Mark Hannigan and Mark Aston, but there isn't, unfortunately, in Rugby League.
I mean, what did you make of the statement? I mean, the actual nuts and bolts of the statement that Sheffield put, I just thought it was a little bit odd. I kind of felt like, because it was before I'd like really dived into what was going on at Sheffield, I was like, this is an odd statement to make. They were sort of throwing the weight behind Craig Lingard, and then they dropped in there, oh, by the way, we're getting rid of the director of rugby. It was... Do you think it was just basically they were kind of trying to silence the fans a little bit? Actually, basically say, despite where we are in the league at the minute, we actually think Craig Lingard is doing a great job. It wasn't his team that he created. He inherited this side. Yeah. Do you think that's what the statement was all about?
Well, it was a vote of confidence statement, wasn't it? Whenever you get one of those, it's because the coach has come under the cosh, and very often it means that coach is going to lose a job sometime soon. But I think with Sheffield, it is a case of, look, this is where we are. We have got a really good coach in Craig Lingard. We've got to see through this season. We've got to go into next season on a better footing. And I think that was just a statement from Sheffield Eagles that this is where we're going. We can see the future. I know it doesn't look great at the moment, but this is the future. And we're going to cut our cloth as well, moving Mark Aston purely to commercial, because they just don't have the money. And I think you'll see over the next 6 months, other championship clubs will be cutting their cloth a bit more.
Right, yeah. Well, that's we try to dissect what's going on at Sheffield.
It's a mad one. I mean, remember when we were saying about Halifax? What are they doing up here? God, this season's gone mad.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything madder than what's going on at Sheffield Eagles at the moment.
No, you're very right. Right, so we'll move on to tackle 3 then. And tackle 3, there's a possible restructure coming. Never thought you'd say that in rugby league, did you? So there's the clubs are looking at a restructure for Championship Rugby League and League One, a possible merger, possible conference. Mark, what do you think's going on there?
Don't know.
No, neither of us know, to be honest with you, but we're just basically dissecting the rumours.
Well, with rugby league in Britain, there's always a restructure around the corner. Whether that happens, you don't know. But
yes.
This is where I think rugby league in our country shoots itself in the foot, because no one knows from year to year what's going on. I'll go and play rugby league in the Midlands, and they'll go, right, what's going on? And you try to explain to them the league structure and what could happen, what might not. They lose interest.
Yeah.
We just need a period of, this is what's happening, and we're going to go for it. But with the League One and Championship, I mean, the reason why the mergers are coming about is because of we've lost Cornwall.
I suppose let's put a bit of context into it before we
Yeah.
So the discussion is that the Championship and League One could merge next year or maybe the year after into 2 conferences, an East and a West.
Yeah.
And the reason that is they're looking at that is to try and make the clubs so that they're playing clubs closer to them. One, to cut down on travel, because I think League One travel is crazy, especially when we had Cornwall to Newcastle in there. So they're trying to cut down on the travel, trying to create more local derbies, which actually creates more revenue for the clubs. So, I think that's a bit of context before we dive into it. I mean, on the face of it, it sounds quite sensible to me. Yeah,
sensible. And I think it's the only option to have a merging of the League One and Championships and do something different. I think it's going to be quite exciting, to be honest. With the way we're going to do things, because it'll give some firmer foundations for clubs to build on, especially the clubs who are developing. They really, really do need that, because otherwise, if they stay in League One in a weakened competition, you can't build on that. Yeah, so it's going to give clubs a better foundation to work on, but also it's going to give an opportunity for these League One standard clubs to see a better quality of player and give them something to aim towards.
Do you think, though, it could potentially lower the standard of the Championship or the conference or whatever we end up calling it? Do you think it could lower the standard of rugby?
Definitely, but if you can just see through the next 3 or 4 years with a conference style setup with East and West, perhaps you're going to have some lower standard rugby. But people need to see that there's a future for them. Yeah. So think about our local team, the Hurricanes, Midlands Hurricanes. They've spent quite a few years down at the bottom. With a bit of investment, they're now getting up towards the top of League One.
Yeah.
Let's say, for example, they do a Keighley and they lose out in the final. That's another season back in League One. So it gives them a better pathway, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right. Did you had a little look, didn't you, at where you thought teams which conference they may end up in? What was your thoughts on it?
But when I was looking at this, if you did an East and West, I don't think it would work out so well.
Yeah.
Because you've got a lot more teams over in the East in Yorkshire,
yeah,
and then Newcastle, and over in the West you've got Widnes, and then you've got the three Cumbrian clubs, and and you might have Oldham and Rochdale, who are closer to Yorkshire than they are to us.
Where do you put London?
Well,
Super League.
Is that? I've been thinking about this. Wouldn't it be fantastic if eventually we could see that? Right, this is where we're going with Rugby League below Super League. If you had an East and a West, London are maybe, I don't know, in the West, and some funding from the rugby football. Well, they're going to have their own funding, aren't they, from Australia? But if we could have some funding for that, then eventually you try and build the likes of West Warriors up and the Hills Hoists up. And you could have maybe a London and the South type conference, maybe include the Midlands Hurricanes in that.
Bedford are looking at semi-professional, professional setup.
I think rather than waiting for these clubs to develop themselves, I know there's not a lot of money around, but if the RFL could get involved in these clubs and go looking and how to help promote these clubs, then you're on to a winner. I think there's too much of, well, Cornwall, they can look after themselves, Midlands can look after themselves. I think if we want Rugby League to truly develop, we've got to actually get in there and help them out.
And there can't be a single League One side. I mean, I don't know what the finances of these clubs are. There can't be any League One sides that are financially stable, surely not, covering the costs, without somebody putting money into that club.
I don't know the ins and outs of Midlands Hurricanes, but they've got a back. I mean, some of the players that they've signed for this season are League One standards / Championship.
Yeah.
They're not brought the Super League players in. But without that funding, they'd be down with Newcastle. They'd be down there with Keighley. Keighley are at the bottom of the table. They're struggling. But you cannot build a club in League One to be strong enough to get into the Championship.
Right, last talking point then. If we went to a conference-style system, which has been discussed before, actually. I think they discussed it only last year and a few years before that. If we did go to a conference-style structure, we're essentially removing a tier out of a professional game. So it's much more like the NRL, this. So in the NRL, you literally have the NRL, don't you, the professional tier, and then beneath that, you basically got the Queensland Cup, and that's pretty much it.
Well, this isn't a new thing for Rugby League in Britain. Back in the 90s, there was Super League, and below that you had a Division 1. And in that, I remember we had a team called Lancashire Lynx, born out of Chorley Panthers. No, they're the but anyway. And they were just getting beat every single week. And so that's not healthy for Rugby League. But it's not a new thing. But if we could try and do something creative with it, like a conference, and at the end of the season, the top teams in the conference came together for the playoffs, and the bottom teams or the rest came together to do some sort of cup competition.
Yeah.
I think this is an opportunity for life outside of Super League to reimagined.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've played around with the 1895 Cup this year, haven't they? So the League One sides have been playing some of the Championship sides this year anyway.
Yeah.
I think what you'd end up with is one of the sort of discussions where you'd end up with two conferences, East and West. They play everybody in their own division.
Yeah.
And then they play a select amount of games from the other conference.
Cross-conference games.
Yeah.
It can get a bit bitty.
It gets messy, doesn't it?
It does, but again, if we can get some people with intelligence around the table to really sit... I mean, there's plenty of chairmen in League One and Championship who've been crying out for change in the Championship. They've got their ideas. Let's give them a say. Let's bring them around the table. It shouldn't be up to the RFL to decide this is going to happen. Let's involve the people who are actually involved in it themselves.
Okay, then let's move on to Tackle 4. And Tackle 4, I think we'll look at the Super League table, potentially going to 14 teams next year. And what does that mean for the Championship club? Which teams we think may not quite make Super League next year? And who do you think out of the Championship who could be a viable option for Super League?
Every other week on social media, I mean, like today, Salford, are they going to get paid or not?
Yeah, I know.
By the time this goes out, they may have been paid, we don't know. But every month when this happens, it's a case of, right, who's going to replace them? And the names that get bandied around are Toulouse and Bradford. But the thing is, you've got York as well. You've got Featherstone who are hitting the straps at the moment. Why can't they go up? they've still got some money behind. They've not got as much money from their old chairman, Mark Campbell. They've got Paddy Hanford. He's got to bring in a bit of money in. Why can't they have a chance?
Yeah, and I think Bradford are financially stable these days. Ground's probably holding them back a little bit. But I mean, if you look at Super League, right, imagine it goes to 14 teams next year. Salford, I'm almost certain aren't going to be in Super League next year. That's if they even exist, right?
Yeah.
So straight away, there's 3 places up for grabs there.
But you know
and you can't even guarantee that Huddersfield are going to be there next year. Their fan base is dwindling at the minute.
Yeah. The Salford thing is a strange one because every month they're having these payroll problems, but every month there's we might be getting investment, and it's always rumoured from Australia.
Yeah.
They're not going to have people sniffing around like they have now if they believe they were going to be dropping down a division. So have Salford been told, sort your financial problems out now, and you've still got a chance in being in Super League next year. I'm not sure if they can.
I think there'll be a lot of fans quite angry if Salford keep their position in Super League next year. And it's not to go against Salford fans or anything like that, but the competition's been dragged through the mud a little bit this year,
yes.
and it's kind of it's certainly made a mockery of the old IMG grading system, hasn't it? I mean, what were they given last year? A grade B, fairly high grade, I think.
I think it was a grade B, but it's based on like previous performances.
Yeah,
it's not based on how are your finances on the day that we publish IMG. Because then just after that, then that's when everything went pear-shaped for him.
Yeah.
But if you let's say that Salford aren't going to make it into Super League next year. Huddersfield, I mean, they're going to move into the share Halifax. I think it's next season.
Yeah, the Huddersfield Giant Panthers.
That's a wise decision because rattling around at the stadium in Huddersfield, it's never going to generate a good atmosphere. But they're moving out of Huddersfield into another town.
Yeah.
Another town that's in the Championship, and they've got ambitions. I mean, especially this season. I don't see how that's going to look okay, to be honest.
No.
So, I mean, Huddersfield haven't had a great season. I don't know what the rest of the setup looks like behind them. There's 2 teams that could actually just lose their grade B and go into C and just not be suitable.
Yeah, so I suppose, I mean, Castleford, grade A Castleford, but, I mean, they're having a difficult season as well. I mean, Castleford aren't going to drop down, are they? They surely ain't going to go from a grade A to a grade C. But you're looking at me like...
No, I don't think they will. No, they won't. They were... And this is what's confused me. I think it was this time last year or just a bit earlier, they had someone who's going to come on board and take them over. And I think that pushed them towards grade A because maybe we've got the financial credentials. But then it was like a few months ago, it's like that takeover still hadn't happened and the person that was actually going to do it was still teaching. I think it's happened now.
Yeah, it has, yeah.
But for me, it was just all about just pure IMG point scoring last year and it just didn't come into fruition because if it did, they would have had a much better team this year.
True, but they have made a lot of improvements. As they've got new seating in the stadium, the LED boards around the pitch, they've got new big screens.
There we go.
Yeah, I can see where some stuff will work, but yeah certainly on the playing side of things, they're a million mile off again.
So the Bulls, they've got a new gantry and they've got a new 32-inch TV screen. Yeah,
we had to send that. They had to send that one back. Nigel's TV needed fixing. Right. Should we actually look at the Championship teams that we think could? Let's pick 4 sides out that we think could possibly make a move up into Super League next year.
Well, straight away, top of the league, it's Toulouse.
Yeah,
they've been in Super League. They know what's needed, and I reckon if they were given another chance, they'd go in with their eyes open rather than closed. I was reading a report earlier on today that the chairman, I think it is at Toulouse, I think he's now in it for the long term. I mean, every year it's Toulouse going to make it because of the financial difficulties, but I think so. There's Toulouse, other obvious choice, second in the league, Bradford. I mean, they are ticking IMG boxes, but actually they've got a really good squad. And if they were to go into Super League next year, would a lot of their squad they've got now be able to move up? I think some would. There'd be some that are due to retire.
Yeah, so. I think it'd be a fair chunk of them. There's quite a few ex-Super League there anyway. Yeah. So I think, you've kind of already got half a built squad for Super League at that point.
Because I think Lee and Wakefield Trinity, they've proved that if you go up and play the squad that you had in the Championship, you're going to make a fist of it in the season you go up. Because that's what happened with Lee the first season. That's what happened with Wakefield this season. They had a rebuild. But you can't just have a really good squad in the Championship, then they're all due to retire next year, and then try and get a new squad for Super League. It doesn't work.
Yep.
But there's a chunk of Bradford squad, I reckon, that would still muster it, and there's a few that would retire, same as with every club. So there's Bradford. And
3 and 4, and who else? York have got to be up there. Yeah.
York, because of the strength of the club.
Yeah.
They really, really do need to build a fan base. When you look at, it was the other week in the football, York versus Oldham in the playoff final for to get into League One. I think it was from the conference into League Two.
League Two, yeah.
Massive, sold out stadium at York. York night, they get half a stand full each week, and that's it. So they really do need to build a fan base, but that's what will come with Super League, I reckon.
Yeah, I find that really strange with York, because they've got everything in place. They've got a fantastic women's side. They've got a great men's side. They've got a brilliant stadium. It's like everything is in place. They just aren't quite drawing the fans in, are they?
No, and that's a shame, because it's not like their squad or their team isn't good. But again, they have this yo-yoing during the season, and that loses a bit of confidence among the fans. But that aside, they've got a backer, I think, that would be able to fund quite a lot of additions to the squad next year, together with the Super League funding. Because it's not like they're going to think, right, we need to spend this amount of funding on our stadium, on our scoreboard, because they've already got all that in place.
Got it all, yeah.
Or on our women's team. They've got all that. So, York.
Yep, an extra IMG points that made it to Wembley. Oh, do you get IMG points for making it to Wembley? Have you got to win it?
Well, we've commented on this.
I think you've
before,
got to win it,
actually.
actually.
I think you've got to win it. You've got to win it, and there's only one team that can do that. If York did that, then, again, that's more credentials, isn't it, to take a step up?
Yep. Right, who's your fourth side then?
No, not Widnes. No, we're just not ready. All fans at Widnes will recognise we're just not ready for it, and the coaches recognise we're not ready for it. Give it a few more years. But outside that, you got Featherstone. But again, the size of the ground's holding them back. But does that matter too much on the IMG? Keep going back to IMG. What a shame. But this is the way it is, isn't it? Other than that, you got Oldham. They've got a stadium that's fit for Super League.
Definitely got the money behind them as well.
They have. The amount of players that they've signed this month in May, it's just phenomenal. They just keep buying and buying more players. So they've definitely got the funding. But have they got the community going yet to the right standard?
Probably not quite. I think it's bubbling away into it, I think is how you would talk. The crowds are increasing.
Yeah.
Slowly but surely are increasing. I think if you have a real good set, I think Wembley would have been massive for Oldham, so it's a bit of a shame that they didn't make it. That probably would have been the boost that the club would have needed.
If some of the listeners would be able to enlighten us, where are Oldham in the community? Have they got that wheelchair up and running? Have they got a women's team? Have they got? I do know they have got a youth set-up bubbling in the background, similar to what we've got at Widnes, where it's based around colleges. They've got it, but again, it's in its early infancy. But I don't think Oldham are quite ready, and I think they'll admit themselves.
Right, on to tackle 5 then, and there's a player merry-go-round going on in the Championship at the minute. Keeping a track of the ins and outs of Championship Rugby League players, well, you can see the size of the paper that Mark's holding in front of him. So, Mark, let's have a little discussion about basically the players that are in and out for certain teams, and I think who's got the most unsettled side, who's settled, and what are your thoughts on it, really?
I think there's been in and outs all the way through the season in the Championship and League One, because it's in the Championship and League One, it's very difficult for most clubs to operate their own squad. They rely a lot on dual reg and loans. Throughout the season, that's happened.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't like that, but I do understand why clubs have to do it. They have to keep dipping into loan because they can't sustain their own squad. But it does, at times, I feel, skew the Championship table a little bit, because you'll have a squad of Halifax, for example. They were flying high at the start of the season.
Yeah.
Injuries have crept in, so now they're having to dip in a bit more to the loan market and dual reg, and that's then not their squad, if that makes sense. But a little bit of context is that contracts end on the 30th of November in Rugby League. You can start if you're coming towards the end of your contract, you can start talking to other clubs. I think it's the start of May. When that happens, clubs then start to understand, are you going to be with us next year or not? And if you're not, then how about you see if you can get to your new club earlier, and then we can bring in a replacement. Because I know that at my club Widnes that's happened, and every year it happens.
Yeah, I saw this with Sheffield Eagles with James Glover. He was it was talking to other clubs about next year, and I think they basically just went, yeah, off you go then. And that's happened all season, hasn't it?
Yeah, it will, particularly now when players. I mean, they're looking after themselves, the players.
Yeah.
What you can't do is say, right, if your contract's ending on the 30th of November, you can only start looking around for a club maybe like the start of November or the very end of the season. Because players, especially in the champ, they really do need to start looking after their own futures, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a difficult one. But in the month of May, there's been so many ins and outs, particularly at Oldham. Oldham have made 5, not loans, but 5 permanent signings this month. So they've got Ryan Lannon again from my club Widnes. Ryan Lannon this time last year signed for Widnes because I think it was under a similar situation from Halifax.
Yeah,
he knew he wasn't going to get a deal or he wanted to move somewhere else, so he came to us mid-season. That upsets Halifax and the likes. So they've had Ryan Lannon. They've got signed Ben Davis from St Helens, a real good quality young centre. They've got a couple of players from France competition, which is just ended. So they've got Eloi Pellissier, which he's got Super League experience.
Yeah, he's a quality player.
Yeah.
Like real quality.
Yeah.
I didn't know he was still going around, actually.
No,
but yeah.
I think he had. Did he have a few years? I think he had a few years at Catalan. Did he? I'm not sure if he was at Wakefield, but anyway. So there's him. They've got Mathieu Pons, a winger from the French competition, and then they've got Zane Musgrove, who left Warrington under a bit of a cloud, but we're not really sure we can talk much about that cloud. But yeah, so he was released from Warrington, ended up at Oldham very, very quickly. But again, quality signing.
Yeah.
So Oldham.
So Oldham have got the most ins basically. Players coming in in May.
Well, they have, but then again, at Widnes on loan deals, we've got AJ Taus from Lee, Morgan McWhirter from France, Jake Mason, a real quality flyer that we should have signed at the start of the season. I'm not sure why we didn't. We've got Adam Lawton back, Widnes lad, on a 2-week loan. But there's a lot of these players 2-week loan because Super League clubs aren't willing to let their players go. Or other clubs not willing to allow them to go from 1-2 weeks because of the injury situation.
Yeah, and there's a lot of Super League teams this year who've got a hell of an injury list, haven't they? So yeah. I can understand that, but
they want the players to go out on loan for 2 weeks to get a bit of quality rugby,
Championship biff.
yeah, harden them up a bit to then come back to Super League when they need them.
Yeah,
and that doesn't help Championship clubs at all. But it is what it is.
I noticed on top of your list, though, the 2 sides who are top of the table, Toulouse and Bradford, no ins or outs on either of those.
No, it's a bit more difficult for Toulouse because if they're bringing players in, it has to be from the French competition, which has just ended. So they've got, I suppose, the pick of the players, if you like. But they've had a settled squad all season. Bradford, no ins, no outs, as far as I can see, unless someone tells me.
No,
they've got a settled squad.
Yeah.
But what is happening with some clubs is they're having to release players because they can't afford to bring anyone in. So there's got to be 1 out and 1 in. Bradford haven't released any players. They don't need to. But that also shows for me that Bradford have got a happy squad. You haven't got players who think, I'm not getting a game this week. I need to get out.
Right, what about Halifax then? Because Halifax started this season like a house on fire. What's going? Because they started dropping a little bit. What's happened with Halifax?
Well, we always said. I mean, I've said a few times their team sheet hadn't gone beyond 20.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's a cracking sign that you've got a really happy squad that are happy to just keep putting in the shift, and they don't want to get injured.
And a good strength and conditioning coach, maybe.
Yeah. Definitely. But once the injury starts settling in, I think some players, it's like, oh, you know what, we've got a bit of a weak team. Maybe I'm talking out my backside here, but then injuries start creeping in amongst other players. So they've signed a few players. They've signed, they've signed David, and I've got to get pronunciation right, No Fuluma, who was
ex-NRL, wasn't he?
Ex-NRL West Tigers.
Yeah.
I mean, a real flyer. But then he's coming from the French competition. They've signed Alfie Johnson he's ex-Rugby Union, but he's signed from Warrington. And they've signed Maxine Job from France. Again, more French players from France. But these aren't your 2-week loans. These are going to probably be until the end of the season and beyond. So Halifax are having to dip in.
That's a smart move, isn't it, really? And actually, in some ways, it's good for French Rugby League because the fact that their league table doesn't line up, these players who are, the semi-pro, aren't they, in France? So at least they then get extra game time, I suppose, when they come to the UK.
I mean, we were talking earlier on about the East and West Conference, and I said, wouldn't it be great if we had a Southern Conference involved in not just the Broncos, but other ones? But then if we had another conference, a French conference that Toulouse are part of, but that means you have to then realign their season and take it away from what's naturally theirs. But then you wouldn't have the influx of French players into the championship like we've got in the middle of the season. So again, is there enough player strength for the championship as it is?
Right. What other sides then have had a lot of movement on the transfer market?
Right. So you've got London. As we said at the start of the season, they're going to have to rely a lot on the loans. So they've got a dual reg partnership with Warrington. They've this week signed 2 players on loan. One, Jack Smith from Leeds and Callum Rathbone from Wigan. And then I know for the team this coming weekend against Widnes, they've got another 3 loan players in. But that's where London were always going to be this season, just relying on loan players.
Yeah, I think London are in a bit of a relegation battle at the minute that they're trying desperately to get out of. I mean, investment into the club, I would have thought we'll see a lot more from London actually in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the investment from Australia, we still don't know exactly where this investment is going to come from. We just know that there's going to be a marketing arm that's going to help out. But is there going to be investment coming for this season? I'm not sure. And will that matter for IMG? I don't know. Will the rules be thrown? Anyway, let's not go into that.
It's a long story here.
Yeah.
Will IMG even exist? We don't know. At the NRL going to come in? We don't know.
Yeah.
It's
but
merry-go-round.
Doncaster, I mean, they've signed Brad Fash on loan from Hull, which is, I think it's only for 2 weeks. But again, he's a good player.
That's a good move, that.
It is.
And do you know what? I was a little bit surprised that Brad Fash isn't still at Hull this year. I saw him earlier on in the season. I thought he was playing really well, but a lot of Hull fans disagree with me. They were saying his defence hasn't been up to it.
I think from what I've been reading, Hull fans have said would love to have him back at Hull if he can just get his fitness levels up a bit.
Yeah, right.
But then they've but they've sent a couple of players out to Gould Vikings. So Jason Tarley and Andre Savilio. So they've brought Brad Fash in and let forwards go out to Gould.
Yeah.
But I think Gould being set up as helped Doncaster quite a lot.
Yeah, there's quite a few teams benefiting from the fact that Gould now exists, actually. Yeah, it's quite a smart move. Any other sides, or should we move on?
We mentioned Barrow at the start of the season, how well they were doing.
Yes.
Right, okay. But there doesn't seem to be much movement on the squad movement for them. They've got Ramon Silva from Wigan back on loan. He's a decent player, but they've had him on loan quite a few times this season.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot happening there.
So he's integrated in the setup pretty much anyway.
But other than dipping into the amateur scene, there's not a lot else Barrow can do unless they can get players who want to go up to play for them. But is this going to coincide with a bit of a drop for Barrow? I don't know. The way that the championship table's looking at the moment, I think is how it might look for the rest of the season.
Right, on to tackle 6 then, and we're going to look at the championship table. There's been a little bit of movement in the championship table. Last time we spoke, Mark, Halifax were flying high at the top of the table. They've now dipped, and we've got a new team at the top of the table. So let's just dive into the championship table.
Well, you say new team at the top of the table. Toulouse have been there or thereabouts all season, haven't they?
Yeah, true, mate. Yeah, true.
Second. Bradford, they're really starting to hit the straps. But going to Halifax, I mean, they're dipping a bit. They've lost a few games recently, but they're still third.
Yeah, so we've got Toulouse on 16 points, Bradford on 16 points, both played 10 games. Then you got the Panthers on 14 points and Oldham on 14 points. Just behind them, Barrow started to dip a little bit onto 13 points, and York Knights are they're making their way up the table, aren't they?
Yeah, so the way it works out this season, every club gets a bye, and then a bye for the return fixture and so on. So the table is a bit skew-whiffed at the moment, with some teams having played 11, some teams having played 10. So Halifax and Oldham have played 11, they're third and fourth, and then the teams below them obviously got a game in hand. If they win their game in hand, they could leapfrog or go on in line with Halifax and Oldham. So I think once the first half of the season is done and dusted, I think we'll see a true reflection of where things are. But again, Halifax, you can't rule them out. I mean, they've signed, as I said earlier on, David Noah. I'll say it properly.
Go on.
Nofaluma, I think.
I think you got that right.
He's a cracking wing. If they can get him firing, then again they'll get back up there. But it's again if they can look after the squad.
Doncaster and Widnes mid-table, hoping to push into the playoffs.
Realistically, with me brain at the start, this is where I thought we'd be. Not really competing with the likes of Toulouse, Bradford and Oldham, and it's just where we were. But again, the amount of signings Widnes have made in this month, you'd expect them to start pushing a bit, because the problem Widnes have had is that the squad hasn't been in depth. Coach Alan Coleman has always been saying, there's nothing for my players to play for other than they know they'll be in the squad every week, they'll be in the team every week. But with these new players, hopefully there'll be a bit of competition and push them a bit more. Featherstone Rovers, they're down in ninth at the moment.
Featherstone in ninth. However, just got to Wembley, and their results are actually starting to take a turn now, aren't they? I would expect to see them climb a little bit. So
there's some things that could happen. They could either get the old-fashioned Wembley-itis.
Yeah.
Right? We've got a Wembley date coming up. Let's focus on that. The players are going to be sidetracked, or I don't think, actually, Paul Cook will let that happen. Because remember what I said earlier on, he's got a consistent message and he'll always keep banging this out. And I think that's coincided with Featherstone's upturning fortunes, just seeing the process through. So I reckon Featherstone will start moving up.
And then the bottom four then, who will be the four teams, if they don't get out of this bottom four, they'll end up in that, I don't know what we call it, the middle eights that merge with the League One sides.
What, the middle eights?
The bottom middle eights.
The bottom middle eights that will eventually feed into just an East and West Conference.
We've got Sheffield on 6 points, Batley on 6 points, London on 4 and Hunslet on 4. Can you see any of them crawling out of there?
I'm going to say it, but next time we do a podcast, it might, what on earth were you thinking of back then, Mark? Hunslet, right? They've picked up 2 wins. One of them was against Sheffield.
Yeah. They've run somebody else really close as well. I can't remember which game it was.
It was probably a crap game, to be honest. But yeah, it was. Right, so they ran Widnes really close. I mean, we blew them away in the first 20 minutes. I thought this is going to be a hiding. But they gradually brought themselves back into the game. And their 2 halfbacks, Lachlan Honnigan and Lee Gaskell, started to run the shot. And they were.
I said, didn't I? Lee Gaskell was a right signing for Hunslet.
He just knows his way. He knows what he's doing. Knows his way around the field. And I wouldn't mind betting that they ran the show at Sheffield. And looking at the team Sheffield put out, it wasn't a weak team compared to last season.
Yeah.
But as we know, something's not quite happening. But Hunslet, they've signed from Widnes Ross. So they've released Ross Whitmore. He's gone to Rochdale. But they've signed Brett Bailey from Widnes on a few weeks loan, which could turn out to be the season long. Adding a bit of beef to the pack. I think that's where they've been lacking. They've got the backs. That's not a problem. But the beef in the pack. And I wouldn't be surprised to see them pick up a few more results that could push them, not to top 6, but away from the bottom spot. I think anything other than bottom spot would be a real win for Hunslet this year.
Yeah, so there's your championship table. It's been already a great season and lots of politics going on off the field, which kind of add to the drama a little bit. We don't know what we're going to get next year with the championship. But Mark, thank you for joining me again. If anybody has enjoyed watching this episode, please hit that subscribe button, like the video, and drop us a bit of a comment in there, because I know we had lots of comments last time we did a championship show, which is the reason we brought it back. We're hoping to do another one in the end of June, shall we say?
Would love to, and then we'll just see everything completely different to what we are today.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for watching.